Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm for here. Today I'm back to talk about another V deck since we're in the middle of our little V season here on the channel. Today I wanted to talk about an interesting deck fusion that I've been working on for a while that involves two very long and historic bosses for Murakumo, which is Mandala Lord as well as Shirayuki. Now, for those of you who don't know or just not old enough, these were actually the two oldest bosses from Murakumo when the game started back in 2010 2011, and these debuted in BTO5, which is the same set as PBO, DOTE, MLB. You figure. Now in V, they've been brought over well and early into the V series. Shirayuki has become her own successful deck, as well as a nice little engine that runs in virtually almost all Murakumo decks, whereas Mandala Lord was one of the best early V XL decks. That it was virtually the first good XL deck, because Razors were complete trash, and we all know that as V went on, we got better V XL decks, so you don't need to play this guy anymore. But they are both cheap, and while Mandala hasn't really aged very well, he has a lot of generic support you can still play. So today I wanted to know, what would it be like if, let's say, you wanted to build a deck around these in modern day, or at least you wanted to try a fusion of older, more familiar flavors instead of Hyuga. So let's actually start. Our grade 3 lineup, we obviously play 4 copies of Mandala Lord and 4 copies of Shirayuki. Now, I think it's pretty much, given by my introduction that both of them have their own engines. So instead, I'm going to talk about them one by one and then subsequently introduce their engine pieces as I go along. So Mandala Lord cards will be put up here, and Shirayuki related cards will probably be down here. So you have a good gauge, and the generics will be in between. Okay, so let's talk about Mandala Lord first. He has 2 skills. When placed on the Vanguard circle, come +1, soul +1. You choose 2 of your own units, and from your deck, you call a copy of each. So generally speaking, it's like a +2 to the board, because you come +1, soul +1. You call 2 clones of 2 units. So you generally need a board on turn 2 before riding up to turn 3. It's basically like playing Garmor in V, if you still play that, which is me. So for Mandala Lord, it's quite okay because you actually combine really well with the Shirayuki engine, who generally has a very good grade 2 gaming and throws a lot of stuff on the board. Mandala Lord is not restricted to just cloning himself, which you should for his second skill, but he can clone other key pieces such as your engine pieces from Shirayuki. His second skill is move a card from your hand to soul, and all units of the same name as Mandala Lord gain 3000 power. Very simple, very effective. There's a reason why this was really good back then. Even now, it's quite okay. You go +2 when you ride him, +3 with XL. You can afford to -1 just for a little bit of power. And with the amount of early game that you put up with Shirayuki, your defense and offense is quite well built. So you don't really have to worry about it. It's just a very nice beatdown deck, and it's cool to really play around him. And he's nice and cheap. And he's, from the Limit Break anime, you can go and say, oh, Mandala jail, and then the guy goes -10. Okay. You want to actually go -10? It's Shirayuki. Shirayuki has 2 devastating skills, and the more you see the core of this deck, you realize it's a lot more that text that you ideally hope for. Shirayuki's first skill, I'm talking about the bottom one first, is when her attack fails, you add a Shirayuki, this one, from your drop zone back to your hand. And that's on the Vanguard circle. So you're like, okay, sure, so the attack fails, I add a Shirayuki. What next? Well, there's a lot of setup that Shirayuki technically needs, but the setup is so easily achieved, you don't even worry about it. Her main skill is when placed on V or R or G, you Soul Blast 2, and you choose 3 of your opponent's front row units, and they get -5. If it's placed on V or G, it's -10 instead of 5. So you're basically playing Heal Guardians after turn 3. Heal Guardians, that's insane. Like, as a Guardian skill, just to -10 from 3 different attackers significantly weakens a lot of decks, and that's the truth of the matter. Even if it's a restanding deck, then it's even worse, unless it's a fresh call deck with stuff like Beatrice. But even so, you are still chipping quite away of the offensive power. Playing it on a rear guard, you generate just -5 to your opponent's Vanguard, so you're basically playing Yasui, Revon, or some other weird shit, and you know what, that's still not the worst application. If you have to ride it though, it's not your best ride target. You really want to go to Mandala Lord, but it's still fine. Shirayuki is still competent enough as a boss that you can still go into it as a ride. Moving on to our grade 2s. Our grade 2s, we play 4 copies of Stealth Dragon, Imitation Mandala. As you can guess from the name, that is the Mandala card. Then we play 4 copies of Stealth Fiend, Jakatsu Girl. And then for our generic here, we play 4 copies of Stealth Beast, Bloody Mist. I believe that is Bloody Mist, yes. So let's go into our grade 2s. I'm gonna talk about Imitation Mandala because he's the easiest. Basically, in the rear guard and on the deck, he is counted as another copy of Mandala Lord. Like I said, Mandala Lord gives 3000 power to all copies of himself. This counts Imitation Mandala. And you can also, by riding Mandala Lord, if you choose Mandala Lord as one of the 2 cards you wish to clone with his skill, you'll need to search the deck for a copy of Mandala Lord. And you can actually choose Imitation Mandala. So in this way, the number of copies in the deck that you get to search for Mandalas goes up from like 7 to... No, it goes up from 3 to 7, which is pretty good. And it gets worse as you go down the rest of the deck. You see, oh my goodness, this is quite insane. His second skill is that if your Vanguard or Rearguard is a regular Mandala Lord, and you have a total of 3 Mandalas existing, he gains boost. Yeah, he gets boost. So now you can have Rearguards boosting with 9k power plus the 3k. You get 12k boosters, and they all count as Mandala Lords. So it's pretty damn insane. And you also remember that, in Murakumo, we have a theme of superior calling and, copying the same name, which Imitation Mandala perfectly makes use of. Imitation Mandala is one of the most important cards to the Mandala core, but it's only a common, so you can pick it up relatively cheap, as I have. I'm gonna skip the Jakatsu Girl first. I want to talk about Bloody Mist. Bloody Mist is one of the strongest early game aggro tools that you have in this deck, and for good reason. On Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, at once per turn, if you do not have another copy of Bloody Mist on your field, you counterblast 1 and superior color copy of itself. That copy gets minus 4k. Now, this scales as you go on, and even though the copy gets minus 4k, at the start of your next turn though, it's no longer 4k, it's no longer 5k, it goes back to its original 9k. And that's just for 1 counterblast on turn 2 onwards. So as long as you have a copy of Bloody Mist and only 1, you can essentially mill your deck to reproduce himself and get more copies. Albeit they are weaker, which is the one downside of this deck. But considering the fact that it's so free for just 1 counterblast, I'm surprised so little people are playing this card as an early aggression. But that's because Murakumo nowadays is very hyper-focused and built into their own archetypes that it's very hard to find a few and far between good generics as well as cards that just work well in general, which is why Bloody Mist actually works really well. This is a deck that wants an early game board. This is a deck that wants to attack and pressure with early good gaming and scale well, and Bloody Mist is a good card to have. Although later on in the game he gets pretty much useless because you want more key pieces rather than this little tiger, so just keep in mind that you generally only use him in the early game. Speaking of someone you can use all game, is this beauty. This is Jakatsu Girl. A absolute demon, because if you've played Excel 2019, if you've played this game in general, you just want to shred this card in half. Jakatsu Girl is only 50 yen, so you should pick it up because Shirayuki Prem already on the rise. You just don't know it yet. Her skill is really simple. When her attack fails, you look at the top 7 cards of your deck. You get to look for 2 copies of the original Shirayuki. And if you do, you can add 1 to your hand and 1 to the drop zone. If you add only 1, or less, you soul charge 1 instead. So basically what this does is that on the top, as soon as the attack fails on the top 7, you can immediately start 2-boxing out for your base Shirayukis, either to hand or to drop. Drop is because you're setting up for your last Shirayuki engine piece, which I will explain in detail. But basically, the long and short of this is you can either build soul for your, for your copies of Shirayuki, or you can straight up just start 2-boxing. And this is if the attack fails. So if the attack hits, you've dealt them a damage. You need 6 damage to win the game. Moving on to our grade 1s, we have 4 copies of Stealth Dragon, Turbulent Edge. We play 4 copies of Stealth Fiend, Rainy Madame. We play 2 copies of Ataka, and then we play 3 copies of Amatsu Snipe. So this is a very weird lineup for grade 1s, but I'm going to explain it, and then I'm going to tie in with the rest of the deck so you actually understand what's going on. I'm going to talk first about Ataka. Ataka is our grade 3 searcher, and his 5k condition is as long as you have a copy of another unit on the board. Why do we only play 2 Ataka? Ataka is a very dangerous card, a very powerful card, and you need it to search out your grade 3s. After all, you virtually live off having your Mandalas as well as your Shirayukis. So why would you actually, only have 2 searches? Well, first of all, you already toolbox your Shirayukis pretty well. You just need to draw your 1 copy of Mandala. Secondly, you don't really have much space to have copies of rearguards, with the exception of a Mandala Lord. So you don't actually want so many of these guys clogging your board, and it's just not as great as you think it is. The 5k condition is actually harder than you think, as long as you don't actually pop off with enough Mandalas competing on the board space. You just lose out. Speaking of someone who does not lose out though, is Amatsu Snipe. Amatsu Snipe is a weaker version of Ataka, but he has a more useful skill because he's combined with a different card in this deck. On Vanguard of Rearguard Circle, as long as the card has been superior called from your deck this turn, he gains 5,000 power. It's a 12k attacker, a 12k booster, and it can go on as early as turn 2. Why? Because we play Bloody Mist. Bloody Mist is such an easy way to superior call from the deck. You just pay a counterblast and you drag a copy of himself. Amatsu Snipe literally negates the minus 4k by having himself as a 12k. And it stacks because not only do you have him on the board, you can have multiple copies of him or multiple copies of Ataka. So that's how you really scale with the generics in this deck. It's a very silly interaction, but it is valuable enough that you can actually grade to early rush stuff like Luad. Yeah, I'm mentioning Luad in this video. So it is quite insane in my opinion, and you could actually steamroll and crush most mid-tier to low-tier decks, because you're not beating Steam Maidens with this, right? You're not. Are you? Maybe. Next off is Turbulent Edge. Turbulent Edge had a Counter Blast and Soul Blast as an activated skill. He chooses all copies of himself and they turn themselves into Mandala Lords. Then you give everyone with Mandala Lord on the board a 3,000 power point boost. Even though Counter Blast 1 and Soul Blast 1 is very expensive, you only need 1 copy to turn your entire horde of Turbulent Edges into Mandala Lords, which means you now have a total of 12 copies of Mandala in the ecosystem, 4 of which are locked behind, actually paying the skill. Now, you want to play the skill first before you trigger Mandala Lord's effect, because you want him to turn all of your other copies of Turbulent Edge into Mandala Lord. Then you give every Mandala Lord 3k with his skill, then you use his skill and you give everyone 3k. It's very silly, very stupid, but it works. So just keep in mind that this is the correct way to resolve it. Mandala Lords, in case I have not mentioned yet, put cards from hand into the soul. This contributes to Shirayuki. Shirayuki takes Soul Blast 2 to actually pay the cost. And that's why you actually play these 2 cards together. That's why you actually, use these 2 together, and it works because your minusing for Mandala Lord fuels your Shirayuki directly, and your early game tempo actually works pretty well. As you can tell, this is a very intricate deck, so there's a reason why these interactions seem forced, but at the same time, it's natural when you actually, mulligan and play correctly. You will be surprised. I've enjoyed this deck a lot. Last is Rainy Madame. I've saved the absolute worst for last because this card completely changes the way this deck plays, which is that as long as one of your rearguards attack fails, you can actually retire this unit, and then after that you add a copy of Shirayuki from your drop zone into your hand. Now it seems very weird. Why would you be adding a Shirayuki from your drop zone? Well, that's because the way it works is that after you cast a copy of Shirayuki, you can actually end it in the drop zone, and then you can add it back with Rainy Madame. Oh, Rainy Madame puts his soul, right? So it even fuels your Shirayuki directly, not retire. I read that wrong. So not only does every attack you fail enable you to just trigger a Rainy Madame on the field, it's a passive on fail pressure for every rearguard on your board, which you have a lot of. So the second you just fail with a Rainy Madame, you just simply move into the soul and you get a free copy of Shirayuki at virtually no cost. It's a net zero cycle, it's a recycler, it is insane. Lastly, for our G0s are very simple. We play 4 draw, we play 8 crits, play a starter, and then we play 4 heals. We play 4 normal heals and not 4 heal guards because you actually want the early game damage for stuff like your Turbulent Edge. It's quite straightforward, is that you need grade zeros, you need crits because you want to crit your opponent, you play draws because you need pieces. This is an XL deck. And yes, that wraps up our Mandala Lord and Shirayuki deck profile. As you can tell, especially when I went through the hidden interactions part, there is a lot of intricacies when it comes to a 3,000 yen deck. And that's insane because you should not be able to do this. And yet you can. In V series, you actually still have all these old cards that still loiter around, not being used or being underused, and you can actually make such fun and interactive decks. Does this deck win? Does this dominate anything? No, not at all. But it's the fun that you can play this at not just an affordable level, but have so much interaction that makes it insane. I'm not here to diss D series, I'm not here to diss premium, but I feel that V series just gives me the most value as well as the most variety, which is why I've even been able to go through so many V decks this month and still so many more. So yes, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, if you enjoyed this series, please leave a like, leave a comment, tell me what you don't want to see next, and I may do it. Take care, stay safe, goodbye.